Welcome, everybody. It's your host, Tino, and welcome to Tino's Time. And on this episode, I'm going to recap week 2 and get you ready to set your lineups for the week 3 of the NFL fantasy football season. And let's not waste any time, and let's get right into the headlines. The injury bug hit quarterbacks and teams big time this week. There were 4 quarterbacks that went down, and we'll talk about it in the next segment when we get into the injuries. Will Fuller is back, though. We saw Will Fuller. He was suspended because of an incident that happened last season, and then he had a personal reason on why he was out this week. Hopefully, Will Fuller is back. So if you've kept on to him, put him in your lineup this week because Will Fuller is somebody that, even though we'll talk about Tua and the injuries because he was one of the quarterbacks to get hurt, I think the quarterback that steps up is going to be looking to Will Fuller's way because he is so reliable. And last year with Deshaun Watson, we saw what Will Fuller did when he was healthy. But speaking of a guy that went off and had a beast day, Derrick Henry is a bad man, people. This man put up it felt like 70. He put up 47.7 points, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns. He even had 6 receptions for 55 yards. And if you know, Derrick Henry is not really known for the passing game. And if this man gets involved in the passing game, that is deadly for people like me that drafted him 2nd or 3rd overall because that just elevates his value and he'll be getting even more points, especially if you're in a 1-point full PPR league because that's just bad. He's just a bad man. And everybody that was worried about Derrick Henry after week 1 in his slow start, you should know that he always starts slow and he gets going. So hopefully you didn't sit him and you took advantage of that 47 points like I did, and I was able to win all 3 of my leagues this week. Welcome back, Green Bay. Everybody was worried after the Green Bay Packers got their butt spanked versus the Jameis Winston and the New Orleans Saints. But Aaron Rodgers said in his press conference, it's week 1. He said his 5-letter word that everybody knows, relax. And what did he do? He came out and he showed out, and the Green Bay Packers beat the spankity out of the Lions. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But welcome back to the Packers. Welcome back to the Packers. Welcome back, Green Bay and the Packers. And everybody should watch out because you know what happens when Aaron Rodgers gets in a mood. But before we talk about that Monday night game, let's go into the injuries because I just mentioned the one quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. He left the game on Sunday with rib injury, and it looks like he might be able to play this week. So that is something that you have to keep an eye on. Also, another quarterback that got hurt that might be able to play, but it doesn't know. I've heard reports that he's out for 2 weeks. He could play this week. It's Andy Dalton. He came out of the Bears game with a knee injury. He went over to the sideline limping. It looked like, everybody feared that it was an ACL tear, but thank God it was not. It's just a bone bruise on his knee. So hopefully he is okay. And Matt Nagy of the Chicago Bears said that as long as Andy Dalton is healthy, Andy Dalton will be the starter. And as everybody knows, Justin Fields came in the game. He had 60 passing yards. He did throw a pick. He did have some really good plays, but Matt Nagy is so insistent on starting Andy Dalton, so we'll just have to see. But a quarterback that is out this week, it's Tyrod Taylor. He has a hamstring injury, and he left the game, and it looks like he is going to be out for a while. So if you need a defense this week, I would go pick up the Carolina Panthers because they are facing probably David Wells on Thursday night. And that guy, he's not very good, and I would take advantage of the backup, especially on a Thursday night. And the Panthers defense was really good this past week versus the New Orleans Saints. Jameis Winston didn't look like the guy that he looked like last week versus Green Bay. He looked like the guy that was on the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm thinking of baseball. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few years ago that was throwing 30 for 30 picks and interceptions and touchdowns. That's just not a good sign for the New Orleans Saints. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. The other injury I want to talk about, Jarvis Landry left the game with an MCL sprain, and it looks like he is probably going to be out a few weeks. So if you need somebody as a wide receiver. We'll get into some wide receivers that you can pick up a little bit later on, but it looks like Odell Beckham might come back this week versus the Chicago Bears. So if he does, then that will definitely help Baker Mayfield, but you're going to have to do without Landry for a little bit, and it finally looked like he was going to get going, but you just never know in the NFL, and these guys get hurt, and you don't know. Deontay Johnson, he hurt his knee in the game this week for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they've already said that he is good to go for week 3. So keep him in your lineup if you have him. He's really good, and Pittsburgh is going to put on a show this week, and I think Big Ben is really, he's shown a little bit, and he's shown that he can still play football. So definitely keep Deontay Johnson in your lineup. But somebody that I don't know if you have him, he was a really good tight end a few years ago. It's Zach Ertz. The tight end position, as you know, is awful. It's not as good as, we hoped it would be. But Zach Ertz is somebody that was really, really good. And yes, Dallas Goedert is there. And, it's whatever. And Jalen Hurts is doing his thing. And, yeah. But Zach Ertz has COVID. Get better, my guy. And hopefully, if you do test negative, he will be able to play. But if you do have Zach Ertz, there are better options right now because I don't know if I could trust him even if he does play. But just get better, Zach, because we don't need anybody having COVID. The last injury that we need to talk about before we talk about the Monday night game, it's Jamichael Hastie. He has a high ankle sprain for the San Francisco 49ers, and the San Francisco 49ers did it to us again this week. Shenanigans, people. I'm so over it. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. And it's just crazy how, the shenanigans. I'm tired of it. It's frustrating. But enough about frustration. Let's go into the Monday night game. And what a Monday night game it was. It started off like the Lions were going to take advantage and they were going to beat the Green Bay Packers like the New Orleans Saints did last week. But the Packers came out and they destroyed the Lions 35-17. The Packers scored 28 points in the second half and ended up winning the game 35-17. And a big reason on why was because Aaron Rodgers put on an absolute show, people. He had 255 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he put up 39.9 fantasy points. But the guy that caught most of his touchdowns, it was Aaron Jones. He had 3 receiving touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. He finished with 41.5 points, 67 yards rushing, 6 receptions, 48 yards receiving, and 4 total touchdowns, like I said. And Aaron Jones proved why he was a 7th, 8th overall pick, and he showed why after week 1 he struggled, but that's why you can't freak out. We talked about it a lot last week on my show. Everybody was worried and everybody was freaking out, but it's only week 1. You can't overreact. You can't freak out, because if you won this week and you're feeling good at 1-1, if you're 0-2, then I'm sorry. But if you're 1-1 or 2-0, then, you're doing your thing and it's okay. But you need to relax. It's a few weeks and, you never know what could happen. An injury happens and all of a sudden that takes out the best team in your league and you just don't know what could happen. But Aaron Jones proved on why he should have been a first-round pick, and he probably helped you win your week this week. So that was a good Monday Night Miracle. We had a lot of Monday Night Miracles. Rodgers and Jones put up 80-plus points. That's ridiculous. But Davante Adams got involved too. He put up 20.1 points. He had 8 receptions for 121 yards. And, Davante Adams showed why you can't freak out again. Even Robert Tonyan got 10-plus points. He got 14.2 points to be exact. He got 3 receptions, 52 yards, and 1 touchdown. He caught a 22-yard pass from Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers, like I said, put on a show. He put up 4 touchdowns. He could have had 5, but he handed 1 to Aaron Jones, which is fine, I guess, but I would have liked another touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. It would have helped me get over the hump and score the most points in my league, but I guess I can't be too greedy. I can't be too greedy. And now let's talk about the Lions, because I just bragged about how the Packers did amazing, and I cannot even believe I'm saying that as a Bears fan. But it's one of those things. It's fantasy football. You can't be biased. You gotta do what you gotta do to take money from your friends, get bragging rights, and you just gotta talk and do your thing. But on the other side of the ball, the Detroit Lions, like I said, they started off really good. They were up 14-0. They were feeling good. It was going back and forth, 7-14, 14-14, but then Aaron Rodgers took involved. And the only guy really on the Lions that did really good, it was DeAndre Swift. He had 37 yards. He had 4 receptions and 41 yards receiving. And, that's not like horrible. He did have 10 plus points. So if you started him in a flex, that was really good. Some guy that we'll talk about in a little bit that maybe you should put in your flex this week because, yes, he has a bad matchup, but Jared Goff needs to throw the ball to somebody, right? It's Quintez Cespedes. He had 4 receptions, 63 yards, and 1 touchdown. And, he looked like he was the most targeted guy by Jared Goff. I almost said Matthew Stafford. Oops. Jared Goff targeted him a lot. And, TJ Hawkinson did his thing too. He had a touchdown. So if you started TJ Hawkinson, there were some good things on the Lions. Like I said, there wasn't really many good things. I thought there wasn't as much. But there were 3 guys that put up some points. So if you were lucky enough to start those guys, hopefully you won. And hopefully you won your week. And hopefully you started off 2-0 like I did in one league. Or if you started off 1-1, 0-2, I'm sorry. But it's okay because, like I said, it's only 2 weeks in, and there's still a long season. Remember, a week was added, and the NFL season is now 18 weeks. But before we talk about all the guys that helped you win your week, let's talk about all the disappointments of the week and guys that probably cost you your week that did really good last week. We had some guys that went off last week that didn't do so good this week. We had guys that struggled last few weeks. But let's talk about it and let's get it over with. So then we can talk about the studs and all the guys that helped you win your week. And let's get into the positive mindset, guys. Because I hate talking about all the negativity and why all these guys struggle. Because we draft you in fantasy football. You get paid to do this and help us get paid. Right? I mean, come on. But let's talk about these disappointments. The first disappointment I want to talk about, he was a guy that was probably drafted 3rd or 4th overall in your league. It's Alvin Kamara. He had 7 points, people. Last week versus the Green Bay Packers, Alvin Kamara put on a show. He had 2 touchdowns, and he did really good, and we were feeling good. But everything that happened last season, kind of like with Taysom Hill, happened this week. And yes, the New Orleans Saints got destroyed by the Carolina Panthers, but that doesn't mean that Alvin Kamara should have had that he should have had less than 10 points. Alvin Kamara is the guy that Jameis Winston needs to lean on. And like we talked about earlier, Jameis Winston looked like he was the guy that was in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's not going to do. So I'm not going to worry too much about Alvin Kamara. But I would keep an eye on him, especially because this is the one thing why I didn't want to take him. Because I was just worried that, everything that happened last season when Taysom Hill came in, Jameis Winston, you just don't know. And it just worries me. And I miss you, Drew Brees. I wish we had all those checkdowns. But a guy I'm really worried about, it's Saquon Barkley. He had 8.9 points, and this is the 2nd week in a row that he scored less than 10 points. And, people drafted him 2nd, 3rd, 4th overall. Maybe he fell 7th or 8th, or maybe even fell in the 2nd round. If you do have him, Saquon is one of those guys that, in my opinion, I would honestly buy low on. If you could get him in a trade for somebody, that would be really good. But he's somebody I'm still worried about, but it's still Saquon Barkley, and I think that, the Giants, Danny Dimes is a guy that, he struggled a lot, but this season he's actually put up a lot of points fantasy-wise, and he has looked a lot better than he has in the last few seasons, and we'll talk about him in the streams and the starts and all that stuff, because I think you might need to pick up Danny Dimes this week, but let's not get too far ahead of myself. Antonio Gibson is another guy. He had 9.3 points on Thursday night versus the Giants, and I was hoping that he was going to get at least 10 points right, but J.D. Mckissick stole a touchdown from him, and J.D. Mckissick looked like he got involved a lot more, and it just looks like it's going to be a running back by committee, and to be honest, I thought I valued running back so much, but it just seems like every running back is in a committee now, and it just sucks, because it's just why? Why are we doing these committees? We don't need it. And yeah, it's not a good thing. We don't need these committees, people. Clyde's Edwards Hilaire, my bad, CEH. He only had 2.6 points, and that's not going to do. He is probably an RB2, and on Sunday night, that was an absolute banger of a show that Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, I almost said Lamar Miller, Lamar Jackson put on. Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes just put on an absolute show, but CEH just did not get involved. Also in that game, Tyreek Hill just did not do very good, and it was one of those things that, I'm not worried about Tyreek Hill and CEH. I'm sure Patrick Mahomes will throw 2 or 3 touchdowns to him next week, and we'll be feeling good. But a guy I'm not feeling too good about is Elijah Mitchell. Oh my God, why am I getting all these guys' last names wrong, people? I'm sorry. But Elijah Mitchell is a guy that everybody went out and put him as your top waiver wire priority. I told you to put him. That was my bad. That was one of my bads. I told you guys to pick up Elijah Mitchell. I thought he was going to go off, but he had 7.3 points, and that just ain't going to do. He did get a touchdown taken away from him. That would have put him over 13 points, but I don't know what's going to happen because, like we talked about in the injuries, Jamichael Hastie is going to be out now. Raheem Mostert is already out, so we'll have to see. But that is something that I'm really worried about. I don't know if I want to deal with these shenanigans anymore, people. I'm just about to drop Mitchell. And another guy, I don't want to drop him, but James Robinson has not looked very good the last 2 weeks. He didn't get his first touch in week 1 until the second quarter. Until the beginning of the second quarter. And then this week he did get involved a lot more, but he just could not get going. And maybe it was the Denver defense, but he only put up 9.4 points, and now he gets to play the Arizona Cardinals defense. Yes, the Arizona Cardinals defense didn't look very good versus Dalvin Cook, but they still have a very good defense, and I have a feeling they're going to want to come out and have something to prove versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're just going to beat the crap out of them. So James Robinson is somebody that I am really, really worried about, and to be honest, I just cannot put him in anybody's lineup right now. I can't. It sucks. He was such a great waiver wire wonder last year, but until he puts up at least 10-plus points, I don't know if I could start him. But a guy that, I'm not too much worried about, David Montgomery. He had 10.9 points this week versus the Cincinnati Bengals after putting on an absolute show versus the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday Night Football in week 1. But I'm not too much worried about him. I'm sure he's going to get going versus the Browns. And, the Bears, if they want to be successful, you have to do what you did last week. And in week 1, just put it combined, and the Bears would be the best team in football. Get that defense and get that offense, and we're golden, right? But David Montgomery, you should be good. At least he scored 10 points, right? Now, let's talk about some wide receivers that struggled. DK Metcalf had 11.5 points. That ain't going to do it, DK. I know Tyler Lockett is, for some reason, the first month of the season every year. This man goes off, and he puts up all these points. But DK is not somebody I'm worried too much about. I think he'll be good to go. And don't you worry, because DK is a beast. And Russell, I'm sure, will get him involved. Jaylen Waddle had 8.8 points. And, he's somebody that went off as a rookie last week in week 1. And everybody went out and got him and picked him up. And I did too, but I didn't put him in my starting lineup because I just wanted to see what he was going to do. And he didn't have a really good week this week. But with Will Fuller coming back and Tua Tagovailoa coming out, and maybe he might be out this week, it looks like, the backup, if he does play, they might look to Waddle's way a little bit more. So I would definitely hold on to him. Don't drop him, obviously, because that would just be dumb and stupid, and you don't want somebody to go and get him, and then you're sitting there like, oh, why did I drop Waddle in a few weeks when he goes off? So keep Waddle. But speaking of another wide receiver rookie, Devontae Smith for the Philadelphia Devontae Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles had 3.5 points. He didn't have too good of a week. The Philadelphia Eagles didn't look as good as they did in week 1, but he is another guy I'm not too much worried about because Jalen Hurts still looked his way. There was a few drop balls and there was just double coverage a lot on him. So don't worry about Devontae Smith and just I would keep him in your lineup as like a flex or a W3 or a wide receiver 3. No, not a W3. A wide receiver 3, and I think that he'll be good and good to go. Amari Cooper, though, he had 5.4 points. Dak Prescott didn't look as good as he did in week 1 versus the Buccaneers. That game versus the Los Angeles Chargers was awesome. It was absolutely crazy. And it was one of those things that, I just don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know. Amari Cooper is somebody I've always stayed away from, in my opinion, because he puts up points like this, and then week 1 he put up 30, and it's just like, he's so inconsistent. It's ridiculous. And it looks like Dak Prescott is looking ways to the tight ends, Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz. CD Lamb is getting involved a little bit more. To be honest, I put CD Lamb as the number 1 receiver in Dallas, but that's just my opinion. But speaking of the number 1 receiver in Las Vegas, Darren Waller had 11.5 points. And you might say 11.5 points ain't bad, right? I mean, it's not bad, but Darren Waller, for being a second, third round pick, putting up 11.5 points, that just ain't going to do it. And obviously, you're not going to sit Darren Waller unless you have like a George Kittle and you're drafting with 12-year-olds, right? I mean, if you have a way to get George Kittle and Darren Waller, you're drafting with 8-year-olds, and I want to be a part of that league. But Darren Waller is somebody that I don't want. Obviously, you're not going to sit him. Keep him in your lineup, and he'll be good to go. And Derek Carr is somebody, to be honest, people, if you can, I would go and pick him up, because Derek Carr is being very good and being very efficient, and the Raiders are 2-0 right now, and this might be the year that they go to the playoffs, and John Gruden's like, yeah, I did my thing, I proved everybody wrong, but we'll have to see. So don't you dare sit Darren Waller and keep him in your lineup for week 3, because I promise you, he's going to go off. But now that we talked about all the disappointments for the week, let's talk about all the studs of the week that helped you win your week, and you started off 2-0, 1-1. Even if you lost to these guys, I'm sorry, but people like me needed these guys to win this week. So I'm not going to do it in any particular order, but let's start off with the Sunday studs of the week. Number 1, talked about him in the headlines. He's a bad man. Derrick Henry put up 47.7 points, 182 yards, 6 receptions, 55 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And like we said, if this man gets involved in the passing game, that's deadly. What about a deadly receiver this week? Cooper Kupp put up 36.8 points, 163 yards, 9 receptions, and 2 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford's definitely looked his way, and if he keeps that up, Cooper Kupp is going to be one of the best receivers in the NFL this season. And if you got him in the late rounds and he's a flex option, that's awesome. Now let's talk about 2 quarterbacks that went off. Kyler Murray put on a show, again, 49.1 points, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw two interceptions. He did rush for 31 yards, and he got a rushing touchdown. So he got 4 total touchdowns. People, Kyler Murray is awesome. Thanks, Cardinals, for drafting him instead of Kyler Murray going to the MLB and playing for the Oakland Athletics. Lamar Jackson, Sunday Night Football, you put on an absolute show, my man. You put up 41.04 points. You had 239 yards passing, 107 yards rushing. Are you a running back too? You had 3 touchdowns. I'm sorry. And yes, you did throw 2 interceptions, but those rushing yards definitely helped, and they brought you over the edge to help you get to 40 plus points, even without throwing very much and rushing for all those yards and those 2 interceptions. Keep Lamar Miller. He's a bad man. He's another one. Speaking of bad man, we talk about Russell Wilson being a bad man. Let's talk about Russell Wilson and his number 1 receiver, Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett put up 31.8 points, 8 receptions, 178 yards, and 1 touchdown. Russell Wilson himself put up 34.18 points. Russell Wilson is a bad man, and so is Tyler Lockett. So if you're able to stack those 2, you're feeling real good after week 2. Another quarterback, he faced Lamar, and they lost this week, but that's okay, because in fantasy, we don't care who wins and loses. We just want it to be garbage time, fantasy gold, scoring bonanza. We just want scoring all day, and this man just continues to do it. Patrick Mahomes, 37.88 points, 343 yards, 3 touchdowns. And yes, he did throw 1 interception, but Patrick Mahomes is an awesome man. And if you're able to get him, and, with me, I somehow beat Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce this week because Travis Kelce also had a really good week. He put up a lot of points, and he did catch a touchdown from Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are just 2 of the deadliest people in the NFL, and they prove on why he's the best receiver and why Patrick Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks that we will ever see play. But speaking of quarterbacks that we have the best that we have ever seen play, the GOAT, Father Time, is still doing it, people. This man put up 45.16 points. Father Time, Tom Brady, the GOAT for the Buccaneers. Brady doesn't look like he's stopping, and it looks like he's playing until he's 60. He's going to have white hair still throwing touchdowns. He had 276 yards, but he had 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. Tom Brady, the motherfucking GOAT. Tom Brady, the GOAT. But speaking of a quarterback that's not so much the GOAT, but it's phenomenal to see this guy finally get a chance, and he's finally being able to do what we all know he is able to do. It is Teddy Bridgewater from the Denver Broncos. He put up 31.78 points, 328 yards, and 2 touchdowns. If you were able to get Teddy Bridgewater late in your draft and he's your starting quarterback, keep him in your lineup this week because we'll be talking about him in the starts and sits. He's facing the Jets, and that's another big matchup. And there's your studs for week 2 on Sunday that helped you win your week. But now that we talked about the studs of the week, it's time for your boy Tino to do a little bit of a humble brag and my bad. This is one of my favorite segments every week. I just do a little bit of a humble brag of all the stuff I told you last week that came true, and then I do my bad and all the stuff I told you that didn't come true. So let's start off with all the things that were just my bad. I told you to pick up Jameis Winston, but he sucked. He was one of my top waiver wire priorities last week. He only scored 8.34 points, but he scored 29 versus the Packers, and it looked like we talked about earlier, Jameis Winston looked like he was the guy on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for all those years. And, I don't want to worry too much. I wouldn't be starting Jameis Winston anyway, unless you're in like a super flex league. That was what I was telling you to do last week. Pick him up in like 2 quarterback leagues. If you are really deep at quarterback, if like you really did not get a good quarterback is what I mean, then maybe you started him. But I'm sorry if you did. That was my bad. I told you. Now another one, Elijah Mitchell. Everybody told you to go pick this guy up. People used so much of their fab money. People went out and got this guy. But we got cursed by shenanigans again. And he was a huge disappointment with 7.3 points. And like I said earlier, he did get a touchdown taken away. But still, Elijah Mitchell, you're supposed to do better than that. And that's just not going to help us, especially with shenanigans. And then another my bad, Juwan Johnson, who... he had 1 catch this week with 23 yards. He was another guy I told you to pick up, and I told you to start I told you to start him this week. Last week I told you, and I don't know if the Saints just forgot to play football this week. I don't know if Drew Brees was in Jameis Winston's body. I don't know what was going on, but it just didn't look like the Saints team that we saw versus the Green Bay Packers. But that is why you never freak out after week 1, because again, remember, a lot of these quarterbacks and a lot of these teams didn't play in the preseason, such as Aaron Rodgers. This man gets going, he's deadly, and it looks like he did versus the Lions. So, and in the NFC North as a Bears fan, and in the NFC in general, I'm scared to face Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry, last week I told you to sit DJ Moore. I really didn't think that he was going to do too much, but the man went off. He had 8 receptions, 79 yards, and 1 touchdown. And if you have him as a wide receiver too, or even as a flex, that is awesome. And hopefully you didn't listen to me, and hopefully you started him, because sometimes I can't get everything right. I'm a human being. I'm sorry, but I do my best. And, so there's a little bit of my bad. But now it's time for your boy Tino to to do a little bit of a humble brag. I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're just going to go with it. I told you to start Teddy Bridgewater. I just told you he went off for 31.78 points, and now he gets to go on and face the Jets this week. That is going to be a great matchup, and I'm going to tell you to start Teddy Bridgewater, put him in your lineup, and just feel good with Teddy as your quarterback going into week 3 versus the New York Jets. And my other humble brag, I didn't have too many humble brags this week, but I'm just going to take advantage of it. Another humble brag. Sunday night was fantasy gold. That football game was awesome. We talked about it. Patrick Mahomes put up points. Travis Kelce put up points. We saw Clyde Edwards kind of struggle, but Lamar put up an absolute banger. Hollywood Brown got a touchdown. Mark Andrews scored 10-plus points, and I'll take it. Tyson Williams did good, and he proved that he might be the running back that you have to start going forward for the Baltimore Ravens. So hopefully you listened to me and you started all your Chiefs and Ravens, which you should have, and you didn't freak out over week 1 with some of those guys. So, hopefully you did, and Sunday night was fantasy gold. And there you go. That's your boy Tino's a little bit of a my bad and humble brags. But now, let's get back to a serious note, and let's talk about 3 things that I learned this week. I thought I knew, but I know nothing, people. Like I said, I talked about Juwan Johnson from the Saints, Elijah Mitchell. These guys always go out and go off in week 1, and just stuff happens, and it's crazy. It's a week to week league in the NFL. Any given Sunday, you just don't know what's really gonna happen. And to be honest, it's one of those things that fantasy football is based on luck. And hopefully you do what you do, and hopefully the guys that you draft do good, and they provide that, whatever, but stuff's going to happen. Again, they're all human beings. They don't care about our fantasy teams. Some people do, some guys don't, but it's fantasy football. It gives dorks like me that live in the basement something to do for fantasy football. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, people. But I thought I knew, but I know nothing. Let's be real. We all think that we know what's going to happen, but we don't really know what's going to happen. Speaking of things that, was something that we talked about a lot in my draft review in week 1 and everything, the quarterback is such a deep position at this point where we are seeing guys like Danny Dimes and Sam Darnold be fantasy relevant. Who would have thought a year ago that Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, and Sam Darnold would be relevant? Daniel Jones is putting up 25-plus points in these first 2 weeks, and now he gets to go play a Falcons defense that gave up 5 touchdowns to Tom Brady. And it's one of those things that if you had Jameis Winston last week, you're in a 2-quarterback league, or maybe you're in a deeper league with 12 to 14 teams where you just don't have a quarterback, I would definitely go pick up Sam Darnold and Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, because like with the Carolina Panthers, Sam Darnold has looked very good, and yes, he's got one of the best receivers in DJ Moore and the best running back in Christian McCaffrey on his team, but that just makes him better, and that's what he needed. He needed playmakers, and that's exactly what he got going to the Carolina Panthers. So go pick up Danny Dimes and Sam Darnold, and if you're struggling this week or you're just not doing good at quarterbacks, put him in your lineup and you're going to feel real good. The last thing I learned is you win your league on the waiver wire, people. We talked about it a lot. The teams that you draft on draft day are not the teams that you keep. I just looked at my draft last night, and there are like 5 guys that I drafted that I don't even have on my team anymore. The guys that you draft on draft night are not going to be the guys that win you your week. It's going to be the guys that you draft or you pick up off the waiver wire when guys get hurt, guys get injured, play the matchups, defenses, because there is a defense, the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, that have scored 10-plus points in the last few weeks, and it's something like that where the defense could get you over the hump, and I have the Denver defense in one of my leagues, and they scored 19 points this week, and that's really, really good for a defense. So remember, you win your week, and you win your league on the waiver wire. So always remember to be up before your friends and keep an eye on that waiver wire. And if you have to, stack your bench with all the waiver wire prospects, because then you could go out and trade and get somebody like Saquon, or go out and get somebody that you really need and deepen a position that you're already good at, or get a position that you're struggling at, and buy low, sell high on these guys, because that's how you're going to win your league. But now that we've covered everything that happened in week 2, let's get to week 3, and let's make sure that we get you ready to set your lineup for week 3, and so you can go 3-0, 2-1, or maybe you need to get that first win of the week, because if you go 0-3, that's not going to be good. And in fantasy football, a lot of leagues only have four teams that make it to the playoffs, but in other leagues it's 6, depending on your leagues and how many teams you're in it. So let's get ready for week 3, and let's get ready to set your lineup so we can get some bragging rights and win and take home that victory for week 3. Let's start off with my bold predictions for week 3. My first bold prediction is Trevor Lawrence is going to be the top quarterback versus the Cardinals. And yes, that's very bold because, the Cardinals looked really good, but then they looked really bad versus the Vikings this week. So Trevor Lawrence, this is going to be his game to break out, and he's going to show the Cardinals defense why he was the number 1 pick. And we're going to be like, what? Trevor Lawrence is a bad man? And maybe that's the headline next week. Trevor Lawrence is a bad man. The other thing, my other bold prediction, on Thursday night, the Panthers defense is going to be the highest scoring defense of the week. Like we talked about a second ago, the Panthers defense has been really good this week. They made Jameis Winston look like the guy from a few years ago, and he didn't look like anything like he looked like in week 1. So if you need a defense this week, go pick up the Panthers, because remember, Tyrod Taylor is out for a while, and it looks like they're going to be starting their third string quarterback. And I'm surprised we won't see Deshaun Watson activated. That has already been told. So go pick up the Panthers defense. My last bold prediction for week 3 is Derek Carr is going to throw 5 touchdowns. Derek Carr has been very good the last few weeks in the first 2 weeks of the NFL fantasy season and in football in general. So put Derek Carr in your lineup, and I'm telling you, 2 of those touchdowns are going to go to Darren Waller, and he's going to bounce back from the week that he had last week, and everybody was freaking out and they didn't know what to do. So put Derek Carr in your lineup if you're struggling at quarterback, and like I said, if you're Jameis Winston, and yeah. So those are my bold predictions for week 3. But now let's get to the guys that you need to pick up that had a good week last week that maybe you just need to stock up on your bench. Maybe you're just looking forward to your bye weeks, because remember, bye weeks will be coming up faster than you think, and then all of a sudden we're going to be like, what are we doing? So these are some guys that you need to pick up now and either put on your bench or do your thing, or just if you need help, yeah. So these are my top 5 waiver wire pickups for week 3. Number 5, I have wide receiver Rondelle Moore. He had a really good game last week versus the Minnesota Vikings. He put up 24.8 points. Or 24.4 points. I'm sorry. He had 8 receptions, he had 8 targets. That was good. He had 7 receptions. So he caught 7 of 8 of his targets. He caught 114 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. And Kyler Murray, we talked about him for Sunday studs. He put on a show, and it doesn't look like he's stopping. So if you need wide receiver help, or if you just need wide receiver depth, go pick up Moore and see what happens. I'm not telling you to start him this week, but it's always good to get ahead of the schedule. And if you always watch the Fantasy Football Show on the NFL Network, Adam Rank, Patrick Claiborne, Michael Fabiano, all those guys. I'm sorry, Michael Fabiano's not on the show anymore, but we miss Michael Fabiano, Kimmy Chicks, all these guys, Marcus Grant. They always tell you what to do, so he's a guy that you need to make sure you have in your lineup. And just put him on your bench, or just make sure you get him. And number 4, it's Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell, he only had 7.2 points, but in the past 2 weeks, he looks like he's going to be getting involved a lot more in the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And it's one of those things with Miles Sanders, you don't know. And it's always good to have that running back depth, because God forbid, if something happens to Sanders and you have Gainwell, you all of a sudden have a number 1 running back that can go off. And he's somebody like a waiver wire wonder that go off like James Robinson did last year. But speaking of a guy that went off on Thursday night, J.D. Mckissick. He had 20-plus points last week. He had 1 touchdown, 5 receptions, and 93 total yards. And J.D. Mckissick is one of those guys that, he's always been good in PPR leagues. So if you're in PPR leagues and you don't have him already, make sure to scoop him up off the waiver wire, because definitely in PPR leagues, even with Antonio Gibson, I think that he will be involved in the passing game. So he will definitely be good as a flex option for people that are struggling, if you have 2 flex league, if you're in a 1 flex, whatever you are in, go pick up JD and keep him on your bench or put him in your lineup, whatever you need to do, because this is what we need to do, people. We need to make sure that we get all these guys. Number 2, Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard put up 23 points this week. He had 109 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He had 3 receptions for 31 total yards. And Tony Pollard is one of those guys that has always been good, just like a JD McKissick. And I cannot believe I'm saying this, but there are some times that I feel like Tony Pollard is more involved than Zeke Elliott. And Zeke Elliott definitely did come back, and he had a good week this week. He had 17 points. So obviously you're not going to sit Zeke. But, I mean, if you need running back help, running back depth, go pick up Tony Pollard and keep him in your lineup and keep him in your bench and just see what happens throughout the few weeks. Because like I said, he's another one. If something happens to Zeke, he becomes a number 1 running back. But this guy just became a number 1 running back, and this is why he's my number 1 waiver wire pickup of week 3. Darrell Henderson Jr. got injured this past week. So, who's going to step up to the plate? The expatriate, Sony Michelle. Sony Michelle, he only had 4.6 points last week. He had 10 touches, but with Darrell Henderson Jr. going down, this makes Sony Michelle now the number 1 running back in the Rams backfield, I feel like. So if you need another running back depth and you need running back help, go pick up Sony Michelle and put him in your lineup this week. Because yes, the Rams are very they're kind of like the Washington football team. They just mess up these running backs, and Darrell Henderson Jr. was doing his thing. Poor Cam Akers got hurt and is out for the year. But go pick up Sony Michelle and put him in your lineup, because I think that he's going to have a really good week this week. Now, let's talk about my top 5 flex options for week 3. Because, we always need flex options. And the flex is one of those positions that you could start wide receiver, tight end, running back. And we just love it because we could start whoever the heck we want. So, my top 5 flex options for week 3 is... the first guy I'm going to talk about is Quintez Cespedes. We talked about him a little bit in the Monday night game. He had a really good game on Monday night versus the Green Bay Packers. He did catch a touchdown, and yes, he has a bad matchup this week versus the Baltimore Ravens and that very good defense, but it looked like Jared Goff was looking his way, and he is somebody, like I said, if you need wide receiver help or you need flex help, go pick him up and put him in your lineup. And number 4, the wide receiver I just talked about, Rondelle Moore. He scored 24.4 points, and Kyler Murray was looking his way a lot. So I would definitely go pick him up, and Kyler Murray ain't stopping anytime soon, like we said a little bit earlier. So go pick up Moore and put him in your lineup. Number 3, Jack Doyle. And you might be saying, Jack Doyle, like the guy that was good with, a few years ago, with I can't think of the quarterback's name for the Colts. Oh my God, I'm losing it. The quarterback, anyway. But I can't think of his name. It will come to me, I promise. But the reason why I'm telling you to start Jack Doyle is because Carson Wentz is probably going to be out a few weeks, and the backup quarterback situation I don't think is very good with the Colts. And what do the backup quarterbacks always look for? Tight ends. And tight end is one of those very hard positions. So if you're struggling at tight end, or you just need a deep flex option, I would go pick up Jack Doyle and start him this week versus the Tennessee Titans, because it's one of those things that the rookies always look for, and the backups always look for the tight ends, because the tight ends are the most valuable position. And the quarterback just came to me. Andrew Luck it was. Oh my God, I cannot believe I forgot about Andrew Luck, people. Andrew Luck, I'm so mad that his career ended as fast as it did. But Andrew Luck with Jack Doyle a few years ago was awesome. So Jack Doyle, put him in your lineup this week if you're deep in flex options. I'm not saying if you're in like an 8-team league, but if you're in a 12 or 14-team league, go pick him up. My number 2 flex option of the week, it's Tim Patrick from the Denver Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater has looked very good, like we've talked about, and the Denver Broncos offense looks like they ain't stopping anytime soon, and now they get to go face the Jets this week, and that defense just is not very good, and that secondary isn't very good anyway. So go put Tim Patrick in your lineup and feel good. my number one flex option of the week is Tony Pollard. Just talked about him in my waiver wire pickup. Go pick him up and put him in your lineup this week versus the Eagles on Monday night, especially if you're struggling with a flex option. He's going to be great for you, and it's going to be one of those things that you're going to be feeling good on Monday night when Tony Pollard scores more points than Zeke Elliott, and you're going to be like, dang, I should have listened to my boy Tino. But that's okay, because if you don't, I'll just do a little bit of a humble brag next week, right? But let's get in to the guys that you need to start, sit, and stream. And this is one of my favorite segments of the week because we just talk about everybody that we need to put in our lineup, we don't need to put in our lineup, and then we talk about some guys that people might not think about putting in your lineup, and they might just come out of nowhere. So let's just not waste any more time, and let's get right into it. The starts of the week for your boy Tino, my two quarterbacks, it's Teddy Bridgewater versus the Jets, and Matthew Stafford versus the Giants. I talked about Teddy Bridgewater a lot already this week in this episode, so we're not going to get too much into Teddy, but make sure Teddy's in your lineup this week. Matt Ryan is another one. Matt Ryan, he's kind of struggled, but last week in the second half, he definitely put up a lot more points. And yes, he did throw 3 interceptions, but he did throw 2 touchdowns, and he had 300 yards. So Matt Ryan gets a better matchup this week versus the New York Giants. So if you have him, start Matt Ryan this week. The 2 running backs I'm going to tell you to start, it's Tony Pollard versus the Eagles. We've talked about him a lot too also in this episode. So put Tony Pollard in your wide receiver 2 or flex option like I said and feel good about it. Damien Harris from the New England Patriots versus the New Orleans Saints this week. Damien Harris has been very good and he's proven that he is the number 1 running back for the New England Patriots. So make sure to put him in your lineup and feel good about it. The 2 wide receivers I'm going to tell you to start this week, it's 2 rookies. It's Devontae Smith versus the Cowboys and Jaylen Waddle versus the Raiders. Devontae Smith only had 3.5 points last week, but on Monday night, this kid's going to show up and he's going to put on a baller of a game. So make sure that this man is in your lineup. And if you need wide receiver help and somebody hasn't already picked him up, which I don't know why they wouldn't have, or I don't know why somebody wouldn't draft him, but go pick him up. Because Devontae Smith is going to have a bounce-back game, and you're going to be like, dang, this guy is good. Speaking of guys that are good, let's talk about Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle is one of those guys that, he's not had, he had a good for week 1, and then he struggled week 2, just like all the rookies will, and they're going to have up and down weeks. But this week versus the Raiders, I think that the Raiders are going to get ahead, and the Dolphins are going to have to throw the ball. And like we always talk about it, the best fantasy points are garbage time fantasy points. So put Jaylen Waddle in your lineup because I promise you, even if Tua doesn't play, I feel like he's going to be the guy that gets the most targets and the most receptions. Now, the tight ends that you need to start this week, it's the Cowboys tight ends, Blake Jarwin or Dalton Schultz. Both of them have been very productive this year, so I would definitely consider putting both of them, not in the same team, but if you can't get Schultz, go pick up Blake because he'll be good, or if Blake is already picked up, go pick up Dalton, but if they're both gone, then that proves why people have already got them, because they're going to be good, and Dak Prescott loves his tight ends, and Dak Prescott throws the ball 40 times, and I think that's going to continue this week versus the Eagles. And, Dak didn't have a very good week in week 2 versus the Los Angeles Chargers. But I'm sure he's going to bounce back versus the Eagles. And, that's going to be good. And, the Eagles defense has not been very good. And that's going to be a game that I think is going to be fantasy gold. Now, another tight end I'm going to tell you to start this week. It might be a very surprising tight end, but it's Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots versus the Saints. I think Mac Jones is going to have his breakout game this week versus the Saints. We saw what happened last week with the Saints. The Saints just did not look good at all, and I think that is going to continue with the Patriots this week, and the Patriots defense is very good, and if you're able to start the Patriots defense this week, you got very lucky. I didn't really think about the Patriots defense being that good versus the Jets, but they made Zach Wilson look like a rookie quarterback that was playing in the NFL Pee Wee League. I cannot believe that. So go pick up Hunter Henry and start him, and if you have him, start him already. Put him in your lineup. The defense I'm going to tell you to start this week, I talked about them a little bit earlier. I said they're going to be the highest scoring defense in my bold predictions. It's the Carolina Panthers versus the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans will be starting their third string quarterback, and it doesn't look like they're going to be activating Deshaun Watson anytime soon. So go pick up the Panthers and start them in your lineup this week. But now, let's get into the guys that you need to sit so they don't cost you your week and we're sitting here next week and we're all having anxiety attacks. The guys that you need to sit this week, it's in the same game. It's Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford. And you're going to be like, why are you telling me to sit the GOAT Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford, two guys that have been absolutely consistent in week 2? And let me tell you why. Because that game is going to be low scoring. That is one of my guarantees of the week. The Rams and the Buccaneers have two great, phenomenal defenses, and I just don't think there's going to be very many points scored on that board. So I would definitely sit Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford. I'm not saying that they're not going to not score fantasy points, but I don't think that they're going to score 40-plus points, 30 points like that Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford has done the last 2 weeks and in week 1 like Matthew Stafford did. So I would definitely sit those guys. And like I said, two guys that you could definitely start over them. We'll get into it in a minute in our streams. But I can't trust the GOAT or Matthew Stafford this week. Just this week, because I'm sure Tom Brady, after this week, if he does have a bad week, he'll be like Aaron Rodgers and he'll come out banging and feeling good like he did. So just sit him this week, and I promise you, you won't regret it. But if I do, and if they go off, I promise you next week, I will say I'm sorry, and I will ask for forgiveness. But the two running backs that you need to sit this week is Antonio Gibson versus the Bills and Joe Mixon versus the Ravens. Antonio Gibson has not been as good as we were hoping for in the first 2 weeks of the season, and now he gets a matchup versus the Bills. And the Bills' run defense has been very, very good the first 2 weeks. So if you have better options, definitely sit Antonio Gibson this week. Now, Joe Mixon, he had a really good week too, but now he gets to go face the Ravens defense, and we saw what CEH did last week, and I'm worried that Joe Mixon is going to do the same thing. So definitely sit Joe Mixon. Hopefully you have better options, and if you don't, I'll give you some streams in a second. The two wide receivers that you need to sit, Brandon Cooks and Corey Davis. Brandon Cooks versus the Panthers. I just don't see the third string quarterback. Maybe I'll look Brandon Cooks' way, but I just don't see Brandon Cooks being very involved, and you don't want to sit there on Thursday night and be like, dang it, I didn't get it, and I screwed up, and Brandon Cooks sucked. So just sit Brandon Cooks, and let's not worry about too much of that Thursday night game. Corey Davis, he had a great week 1. He sucked week 2 because Zach Wilson couldn't find anybody to pass it to except the opposite team, and he just threw interceptions nonstop. So, Corey Davis this week, I love you, my guy. You're going to have better weeks to come. But this week versus the Broncos defense has been very good. And until Zach Wilson can prove to me that he can throw more touchdowns than interceptions and he can get over 200 yards, I love Corey, but I just don't trust Zach Wilson. So sit Corey this week, and we'll talk about him next week, and we'll see what happens this week. But I can't trust it. He only scored 2 points this week, and I can't let that happen again. The two tight ends I'm going to tell you to sit, it's Tyler Higbee versus the Bucs. I told you to sit Matthew Stafford, sit his tight end too, Tyler Higbee. I just think this is going to be a defensive game. It might even be a field goal game, and who knows, nobody will throw a touchdown. I just feel like it's going to be one of those games, and I just don't want to be sitting there, and I love Tom Brady, and he's the GOAT. Don't get me wrong, but I can't. So sit Tyler Higbee and sit Matthew Stafford and the GOAT Tom Brady. The other tight end I want you to sit is Logan Thomas versus the Bills. The Bills defense has been very good, and Logan Thomas did put up 9.3 points last week, and he did have a very good week, but I just think that there are better options at tight end. And yes, like we talked about, the tight end position is very thin, and it's very hard to find a tight end, but if you do have a better option at tight end, I would definitely consider sitting Logan Thomas versus the Bills. Now, the defense that we need to sit this week, it's the Dolphins defense versus the Raiders. The Raiders offense has looked very, very good so far this year, and I think it's going to continue this week. So definitely sit Miami's defense, and maybe they'll go off and maybe they'll have a good week, but I don't see the Las Vegas Raiders offense stopping anytime soon. And like we talked about, I think Darren Waller is going to have a better week than he did. But now that we talked about all the guys that we're going to sit this week, let's talk about the guys that we're going to stream, and that if you have all the guys I just told you to sit, like Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford and Antonio Gibson, I'm going to tell you guys that you could put in their place that will definitely give you better production and better fantasy points. And it's not always about the name. It's always about the guys that getting that production and getting the value and getting the upside. So the first two streams of the week, I'm going to tell you the two quarterbacks. It's Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold. I can't even believe I'm saying this, people, but Danny Dimes has scored 20-plus fantasy points in the first 2 weeks, and Sam Darnold looks very different in the Carolina Panthers offense. And they have the Falcons this week, Danny Dimes does, and Sam Darnold has the Texans. And I think those two games are going to be absolute shootouts, and there's going to be no defense. I think there will be defense in the Texans-Panthers game, but in the Falcons-Giants game, there ain't going to be no defense. But for the Carolina Panthers, I don't see the Texans having a very good defense. And I think the Panthers are honestly going to win like 35-0. So if you are looking to stream Danny Dimes and Sam Darnold and feel good about it. The two running backs that you need to stream this week is Kenneth Gainwell versus the Cowboys and Javonte Williams versus the Jets. You're saying Javonte Williams who? Like, who's that guy? He's the Denver Broncos backup to Melvin Gordon. And if you watch football and if you know what's going on, Williams has been very good and he's had a few good games. And, he hasn't put up great numbers, but he gets to face the Jets' awful defense this week. And we saw what Damien Harris did last week. So put Javonte Williams in your running back 2 or flex option and feel good about it, because versus that Jets defense, he's going to score a lot of points. Now, Kenneth Gainwell, he's a guy that, Miles Sanders is still there, but he's been getting a lot more production as the weeks have went on. And he's doing, he's taking advantage of the opportunity he gets. So if you're struggling at flex, I told you to go pick up Gainwell and put him in your, like I said, flex options and feel good this week. The two wide receivers I'm going to tell you to flex this week, or to stream this week, is Nelson Aguilar versus the Saints and Marquis Brown from the Baltimore Ravens. Nelson Aguilar has had a few good weeks, and Mac Jones just continuously look his way, and the Patriots-Saints is a game that I think could honestly be fantasy gold. So if you're looking for a wide receiver to stream this week, put in Nelson Aguilar and feel good about it. Another wide receiver, he had a touchdown on Sunday night for the Baltimore Ravens. It's Marquis Brown. He's facing the Lions this week, and we saw what Green Bay did to them. Yes, Aaron Jones got a lot of the touchdowns, but Robert Tonyan scored a touchdown. Aaron Jones got 4+ touchdowns. Rodgers threw a lot of touchdowns. So I think Marquis is definitely going to catch a touchdown versus that Lions defense. And, who cares if it happens in the first or the fourth quarter? It still counts in fantasy football. The two tight ends that you need to stream this week, Jared Cook versus the Chiefs and Hunter Henry versus the Saints. I just talked about Hunter Henry in my starts. I think that you should definitely go pick him up and start him and stream him if you're struggling at tight end, because I think he's going to be very good this week. Now, Jared Cook, he caught a touchdown this week. He was definitely very active in the passing game for the Los Angeles Chargers this week. So, versus the Chiefs this week, if you're struggling at tight end and you just need a tight end to feel good about this week, go pick up Jared Cook, because Justin Herbert is definitely looking his way. And you'll feel good about it after he catches another one. And yes, we say touchdown dependent, but that's what we want. We want touchdowns. That's where we get the most fantasy points. So go pick up Jared Cook and feel good about it. I can't even believe I'm saying to pick up Jared Cook, but that's just what you got to do in fantasy football sometimes. Pick up guys that are getting the value, but they might not have the biggest name. Now, my last stream of the week, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you need to stream the Patriots versus the Saints. The Patriots defense put on a show versus Zach Wilson. They intercepted the ball 3 times, and they completely made the Jets look like a high school team. And this week, they get to go play Jameis Winston and the interception throwing machine. So I could easily see them getting a pick 6. So if you need a defense to stream this week, I always love to stream defenses, because to be honest, I don't know why you would not stream defenses, because that's just one of the best things in fantasy football is streaming defenses. So if you need a defense to stream this week, pick up the New England Patriots. Now, let's talk about games that are going to be fantasy gold for week 3. I just talked about Danny Dimes. Let's talk about the Giants and Falcons. You need to start all your Falcons: Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Cordell Patterson even maybe. He's another option if you need a flex. Go pick up Cordell Patterson, because he looks like he's getting involved a lot. And Mike Davis is somebody else that I just do not want at all. And I'm just disappointed in him, and it's not very good. So if you need a help, go pick up Cordell Patterson. But everybody in that game is going to be awesome. Danny Dimes is going to throw touchdowns. Sterling Shepard's going to catch one. Even Kenny Galladay might get one. And I'm telling you, sorry, I don't know why I'm pointing at you, but I'm telling you, if you can, go get Saquon Barkley before this week, because if you can, he's going to go off, and everybody's going to be like, oh my God, Saquon is back. And if you can get him, you're going to feel real good, especially if you get him low, because he's had a bad first 2 weeks. Now, the other game that's going to be fantasy gold, it's on Monday night. It's the Eagles and Cowboys. So make sure you start Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Kenneth Gainwell, Miles Sanders, everybody, Dallas Goedert. Just start all of them on the Eagles. And on the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard. That Monday night game is going to be an absolute fantasy gold game. And possibly the Saints and Patriots. Because I want to say possibly, because I told you to start the Patriots defense because of the Saints offense that just did not look very good in week 2. And what offense is going to show up? Is it going to be the Saints offense that we saw versus the Packers? Or is it going to be the one that we saw this week where Jameis Winston looked like he was on the Bucs? So possibly a fantasy gold game, the Saints and Patriots, but that is only because I feel like the Patriots might get up to a very high lead, and then the Saints are going to get a lot of garbage time fantasy points. But hey, like we always talk about, fantasy points always count in garbage time, and no matter what happens. But the last thing I want to talk about for week 3 before we go, and your boy Tino signs off, it's my 3 guarantees of the week. We saw a lot of stars struggle in week 1, and we saw a lot of different stars struggle in week 2 that had phenomenal week 1s and everybody was feeling good about. But the 2 biggest stars probably have to be Darren Waller, Alvin Kamara, 3 stars, and Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill and Darren Waller, though, are the 2 guys that I feel like are going to bounce back this week. And Alvin Kamara can too, but like we just talked about, I don't know what's going to happen. And if the Patriots get off to a lead, but I mean, you obviously you're not going to sit Alvin Kamara, but I just don't know what to expect. I don't know if he's going to get 20 plus points or if he's going to get 10 plus points, so I don't want to give you a guarantee. But I do guarantee you that Darren Waller and Tyreek Hill will bounce back, and they are going to come back and show why they were worth that first round pick or second round pick, depending on where you got them. My other guarantee of the week, my second guarantee of the week, I've talked about it a lot in this show. It's the Buccaneers versus Rams. That's going to be the lowest scoring game of the week, and that is why I'm telling you to stay away from most guys. Obviously, you're not going to sit Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Rob Gronkowski, especially if you're in like a super flex or a 2 tight end league, but just don't expect too many points and expect a lot of receiving yards and passing and targets and receptions. And I just don't think this game is going to be very, very good, as in fantasy points wise, because the defenses are just so good. And you have to remember, people seem to forget the Buccaneers brought everybody back from their Super Bowl team, and that's just not good for the league. And their Buccaneers are proven why they might just go back, and Tom Brady might just get his 8th ring and he's going to play until he's 60. But yeah, so that's my second guarantee of the week. My third guarantee and my last guarantee of the week, I kind of wanted to be funny about this. At least one team is going to go 0-3. The teams are the Falcons versus Giants. They were both 0-2, so we will at least see one 0-3 team. But there are also other teams that could fall to 0-3, such as the Lions, the Colts, the Jaguars, the Jets, and the Vikings. They all can also fall to 0-3, and we can see many teams at 0-3. But my last guarantee of the week, I was just trying to be funny and kind of entertaining with this one. At least one team in the Falcons-Giants game is going to fall to 0-3, and we'll talk about it next week, and we'll see how many teams actually did fall to 0-3. And you know, if you don't know, in the NFL, if you fall to 0-3, you might not make the playoffs, and it's not looking good for your chances. But remember, they did add one more playoff team to the NFL. So we'll have to see what happens, but I promise you, those are the 3 guarantees, and all 3 of them are going to happen. And if they don't, I'll be like, my bad next week, and you guys could all yell at me in the comments. That's okay. Whatever works. But there you have it, everybody. I've recapped everything that happened in week 2. I've gave you everything I possibly can to set your lineups and get you ready for week 3. Hopefully you're doing good in your league. Hopefully you're listening. Hopefully all this stuff and all this information is helping you set your lineups every week, because I love helping everybody and everybody that I can, because that's what I do. And your boy Tino is the fantasy guru and the Mr. Broadcaster, as my friend Brandon likes to call me. I do my best, and hopefully all this information helps. I cannot believe that we're already in week 3. Make sure you listen to all this information. Get all this information in your lineup. Do your thing. Remember to smash that subscribe button. Go follow at TinoTime1996 on Instagram, at TinoTime10 on Instagram, at TinoTime1996 on Twitter. My bad. TinoTime10 on Instagram. Remember to go check out my other page, Tino Times Wrestling. We have Extreme Rules coming this Sunday, so make sure to watch out for that podcast. The WWE Extreme Rules pre-show coming this Sunday on Tino's Time Wrestling. So make sure to check that out. Remember, again, to smash that subscribe button. Help your boy Tino out. Let's get those numbers up. And until next week, when we recap week 3 and we get ready for week 4, this is your boy Tino, signing out.